We've probably visited, I don't know, 15, 17 European countries, and I've got to say that Budapest at night is probably one of the most beautiful scenes that you'll ever be able to see in Europe. One strange thing about Hungary is, an American, we're used to air conditioning. We love air conditioning in our homes and in the cars. But for some reason, the Hungarian people think that cold air makes you sick. So if you have a sore arm and you go to the doctor might say, well, have you been sitting in the car with the air conditioning blowing on your shoulder?
Because that's what's making you sick.
That's what's making you sick. And so a lot of the apartments won't even have air conditioning because the Hungarian people think it makes them sick. And so they'll sit in the humidity and in the heat through the summer.
And just swelter. And they'll come down to visit us in our apartment, and it's all, oh, it's so cold in here. I say, well, I go into yours, and it's so hot in here. So it's just a difference of what we're used to. But they really do believe that if you sit in air conditioning, that you will get sick.
Yeah, they really.
It will cause everything that's wrong with you.
And another tradition that we kind of found interesting was they had a Day of the Dead type holiday. I think it was about November 1st, similar to our Halloween and Memorial Day, lumped together, and they would go to the cemeteries at night. And all the grave sites would be filled with candles. Maybe one grave site would have 20 candles, and they would light them all at night. The cemetery would be aglow. And they would call it the Night of the Dead, and that's how they would remember their loved ones, similar to our Memorial Day, but at the same token, it was a little similar to what we would think of as a Halloween, although there was no trick-or-treating. But it was really amazing to go and see how they honored those that had died in their families.
The cemeteries are just jam-packed. You can hardly even walk up and down the aisles, and the cemeteries are huge. They're just miles and miles and miles, and they're really, it's really interesting to walk through the cemetery. We loved it.
We lived there for a year and a half in Budapest, is where we lived. And it was amazing for a city the size of Budapest, I don't know, 2.5 million. If I look at a city in the United States that size, I don't think that I would have ever been as comfortable and felt as safe as I did in Budapest. We'd walk through parks at night. We would take the subways at night, come home late. We never felt threatened. We were never harassed or tried to be mugged or anything in any way. We felt very, very safe. And especially if you're in the tourist areas. If you're over in the tourist areas in Buda, you're not going to have any trouble at all. At least we didn't. Now, we didn't. There were bad areas I'm sure we shouldn't have gone to, and we didn't.
We lived in a very nice, we lived in the Buda Hills, which was a very nice district to be living in. And it was lovely. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting is the lack of guns, which I love. Over there were, you're just told to not pick up any of, sometimes you can go around some of these sites and see the bullet holes and actually see some of the shells from the revolution that are laying there. But you aren't to touch them, you aren't to pick them up. And it really is against the law, really, to have a gun. They do some hunting, I think, for some wild boars and different things. But it's not like it is in the United States where everyone has a gun. And so we felt really safe that that was something that we felt comfortable with. There's a lot of people begging for money on a lot of the corners and different things, but we never felt afraid or
it's obvious threatened. You're an American or you're not a Hungarian, and so they can see that. It stands out pretty much, but we never felt uncomfortable at all.
Not at all. We had the opportunity to travel all through Hungary. It's about 3 hours to each one of the borders. And we had an opportunity to see so much of the country, and it is just beautiful. At different times of the year, we would see all of the canola fields that were just miles and miles and miles of rolling hills of canola fields that are so beautiful. Lavender fields are just everywhere. And the sunflowers in the early summer, maybe June, July, the sunflowers are like this big, and they're taller than Fred. We'd stand out there in these acres and acres of sunflowers, and it's stunning to see how beautiful they are. And rolling hills and fertile farms. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful country. And the transportation is easy to get around, the Villamush and the buses and the metros, and you can just about go anywhere by their mass transit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. And we did have a car. We did travel around, and we lived in Budapest. And we had a very small car, a Toyota Yaris, which was probably good that way because the streets are still cobblestone often, and parking is up on the sidewalk. It seems a little unusual to us the way they do things, but it was an adventure just to drive around. If I were a tourist, I probably wouldn't rent a car in Budapest, but if I were headed out into the country, I would definitely, because it's very easy to drive around the country.
Between walking in between, and to be able to make those connections and get to wherever you want, it's very easy.
It was also fun to see the European culture. It's quite common each day. You go to the market each day or two to buy your bread. The little ladies with their baskets carrying home their flour markets, the vegetables, the fruit markets were amazing. Carrying home their bunch of flowers and their fresh loaf of bread and whatever they had gotten at the market. It's just kind of different from our Costco culture. It was kind of fun to see and see the simplicity of it.
Well, and they don't really have, refrigerators are very, very small, and the freezers are pretty much non-existent, maybe teeny. And so you just can't purchase a lot like we're used to. And stockpiling a bunch of groceries, there's not a place to store it in the cupboards or in the refrigerators. And ice, they just think we're crazy Americans that want ice all the time, but
we do.
But we do. And they would accommodate if they could, but it wasn't readily available. The food in Hungary is really delicious. It's a little heavier than we were used to here. One of the favorite dishes is chicken paprika, which they make with a delicious paprika that is made in Hungary. There's a savory paprika and a spicy, and you can season all of your dishes with that seasoning, and it's used heavily in a lot of the Hungarian food. They also will serve that with, and it's made in kind of a creamy sauce, and then they put that over a nokedli noodle that they make from scratch that's made kind of like a dumpling with the flour and egg and water, and then they put it through a little nokedli machine that you put on top of the stove and get boiling water, and then it falls into the water and makes these little dumplings. So they put the paprika over this homemade nokedli that's really one of their most famous dishes. Another famous dish that they make in Hungary is their goulash, and it's a delicious stew. It's very savory, has vegetables and carrots and just a good brown sauce.
Yeah, tomatoey brown sauce. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's also a real popular dish.
The Hungarians, one of the things that we notice different there is beef is very rare. You'll have a lot of pork, mainly, and then chicken. But very rarely will you get beef. Mm-hmm. And so we had to get used to eating a lot of pork because that was the main meat for the country of Hungary, mm-hmm. Probably a lot of the Eastern European countries.
And one of the favorite desserts that they use there, they call them pancakes, but they're often referred to as a crepe in Eastern Europe. And they're made similar in a crepe pan, and then they roll them up with some jam or Nutella, and they're delicious with berries, and that's also a very, very common.
And kind of surprisingly, we found that there's a large Italian food influence in Hungary. Mm-hmm. Oven pizzas are found all over the place, and a lot of pastas and a lot of Italian dishes are there as well.
One of the fun things that you can't go to Hungary and not try is to go to Rose's, and it's across from the St. Stephen's Basilica, and it has rose ice cream cones, and they make those individually scooped by petals. So you'll choose 3 different flavors, and they'll go through and fill the filling, and then different petals, one color, the petals another color, so you have 3 different when you get done, you've got an ice cream cone that looks like a beautiful, colorful flower, and they're delicious. And so that's really one of the fun things that everybody that would come to visit, we'd always have to take them to get a rose ice cream because they were delicious.
Well, Eastern Europe isn't as developed as Western Europe. And I remember the day we flew into the airport, and it was March, and it was a rainy, dark day. And coming in from way out of town in the airport, and the airport, of course, usually isn't in the best part of town anyway, I kind of wondered as we drove through town kind of a little bit about what we were getting into. Because a lot of the architecture has been run down, the buildings haven't been maintained as well as they would like to be able to do it, because 70%, I believe, of the buildings in Budapest were damaged to some extent in World War II, and many of them hadn't been repaired. And so you would see a lot of those older buildings, but it took a while for me to appreciate them and the architecture, because here in America we're used to things being so new. And in Hungary especially, things aren't new, and you learn quickly to appreciate them for their age and what they are.
Well, and they'd put a lot of during the war times, they would put so many of the Hungarian people in these 10 stories. And so that was startling a little bit as we drove from the airport into the city, just to see rows and rows and rows of 10 stories that were just very dilapidated, and unbelievable how many that there were that they were housing all along. And we found that all through Hungary, everywhere that we would go, there would just be rows and rows and rows, as far as the eye could see, of these 10-story places that they would house the people, it's a great gift for them to have this cheap housing to live in, but it's something that we weren't used to.
Well, the holidays, a lot of them were the same. They, of course, celebrated them in different ways. Christmas was celebrated different than the United States. They would have a day, I believe it was about the 6th of December. They would polish their shoes and put them out by the door, and their version of Santa Claus would fill the shoes with candy during the night if they had been good. If they hadn't, they would get coal in their shoe the next morning. And so that was celebrated earlier than our Christmas. And on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, it was more for the families and the actual celebrating the birth of the Savior. The one thing that was different, we found, is things closed down in Hungary on holidays.
Everything.
When they have a holiday, you don't go to the grocery store, you don't go to the mall. Everything's pretty well closed down. It's a holiday for the Hungarians. And I guess the biggest holiday that we enjoyed most was on the 20th of August, when they had it was similar to our 4th of July, and they would line the Danube with barges and shoot fireworks up straight from the barges all along the Danube. And I don't know how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of tourists would come. And the fireworks would go on for at least a half an hour, and it was amazing to watch them. They had some great holiday traditions there.
Well, and all the markets. They would have all these wonderful markets with all of their wares and special things that are made, specialty items that are made there, crafts and different things, that we were able to get some beautiful linens and some nativity sets and some gifts for our children that were made in Hungary. Some of the fabric that they stamped that is unique to Hungary. It's blue fabric that they have these stamps that are out of wood, and then they have like little pins that are sticking up, little nails with little tops, and they print them with white ink. And so the patterns are beautiful. The linens, the tablecloths, the aprons, and to have a piece of unique Hungarian linen is really wonderful.
Especially the markets at Christmas and at Easter. It is a problem, though, getting it all in your luggage to come back home again. So we found that out, especially after a year and a half of living there. Well, you have to remember that ever since the 1930s through 1990, Hungary lived under Nazi rule, and then the Russians came and freed them from the Nazis, but the catch was they never left. And so then they were suppressed and lived under communist rule for about the next 40 years. And that really stagnated their growth economically, culturally, and with religion, because all of those views were suppressed by the communist government. And so this is a new time for Hungary and Eastern Europe as it's emerging, having to create its own markets, having to create its own trade, really to find its new identity away from the history that it suffered under of the Iron Curtain. And there are a lot of great tourist attractions there.
Oh, yeah.
The Museum of Terror, the Jewish church has a tremendous synagogue has a tremendous cemetery and monuments. I think over 300,000 Hungarian Jews were taken to Dachau during World War II era. And so there's a lot of history there.
Shoes on the Danube.
Shoes on the Danube, where the Jews were actually led to the Danube, removed their shoes and belongings, and shot and pushed into the river. They are embarrassed by it. There's a park probably a few miles out of town called the Memento Park. That's where they've taken the remaining pieces of the communist statues down of Lenin or Marx or from whatever. And a lot of them are broken and in pieces, but they've taken them out and put them in a special park that you can go see them. But they don't readily talk about it, and they don't really tell you about it. You have to find out about that on your own. So they have a lot of history that's dark, but they're eventually turning the corner on that and trying to be more like Western Europe and become more democratized.
Esztergom is beautiful. That is where Saint Stephen, I think he was the church was there. It's the big Catholic church, and it's right there on the edge of the Danube that goes down. It's right on the border of Slovakia. And it's beautiful, and it's really, really fun to go down and to see all of the artifacts and see the actual church, and to be able to go up into the dome and to look out over the whole valley and the mountain. It's just beautiful. Our very favorite place is Fisherman's Bastion, which is right in Budapest. It's the crown jewel of Europe, truly. We would go up there, and it's right by Matthias Church, which is a beautiful, unique church that has all these different colorful tiles that are on top of the roof. And it is got a mosaic motif inside. It's a beautiful stained glass. It's a different type of a church that you would never see. But you go see that, and then there's all of these little alcoves on these bridges that are on the top of Fisherman's Bastion and Castle Hill. And in the evening, if you'll go at dusk, you can stand there, and the lights will all start to come on across the bridge from the Parliament. So the Parliament lights will all start at the very bottom of Parliament and gradually start to illuminate till the whole thing is ablaze. All of the 6 different bridges that are right there, they all start with a little teeny light, and before you know it, they're all brilliant. You can see the Budapest Eye that illuminates, and all the lights on Castle Hill, and all of the great big huge boats that are going up and down the Danube. It's totally magical. It's one of those places that I go to in my mind when I've had a hard day, and I just think it truly was one of the most beautiful places. And in the summertime, there's a violinist and a acoustical guitarist that are there playing beautiful music, and it's just probably one of the most romantic places that I've ever been, and you can't go up there without your heart just swelling. Just love it. It's just absolutely beautiful. My heart swells every time I think of Hungary. Truly, the year and a half that we lived in Hungary was probably one of the sweetest experiences of our lives, and we think of it with great fondness. We have developed strong friendships with many, many Hungarian people who we're still in contact with almost every day, and our hearts long to go back. It is a beautiful country. We felt accepted and loved and appreciated while we were there, and we have a great love for what this people have gone through with the suppression and the hard things that have endeared us to the many years of hardships and tribulations. They are very strong people, and they're wonderful, and our friendships are very dear to us. And if we could encourage anyone to ever go and visit that beautiful country, we would highly recommend it. It was one of the most precious experiences that we have had together in our lives.
That's right. It was a dream for us to spend a year and a half living in Budapest. We loved Budapest. The people were welcoming to us, and we'll always have a spot on our hearts for Hungary. And even though that we are home, a part of our heart and part of our home still is in Budapest. Like I had mentioned before, there's nothing more beautiful than sitting on Castle Hill in a summer's evening and watching the lights come on as the boats go down the Danube. It's a beautiful place, and I think that if you travel there, you will find you're welcome. The people will be friendly to you and welcome you, and it will be a great experience, especially as you get to know the culture and the people better. It's a home away from home for us now.